TPSL. What does the E stand for?
Ephesus.
Ephesus. Okay, how about the first S?
Smyrna.
Smyrna. How about the first P?
Pergamum.
Pergamum. Yep. It can also be Pergamus. It depends on which tense you use. How about the T? Thyatira. I think that was the sister in Gone with the Wind. Thyatira. No. Scarlet and Thyatira. How about the S?
Sardis.
Sardis. How about P?
Philadelphia. That was the easy one.
And Laodicea. Okay. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if I don't think I've really hit much on this at all. Each one of these has a meaning to it, and essentially, Ephesus means darling. I don't know why, but that's kind of what it means. Smyrna is actually a derivative of the word myrrh. Okay, and everyone knows that myrrh is used for dead bodies, prepare bodies for burial and preservation. Okay.
Everybody knew that?
Huh?
Everybody knew that?
You're supposed to go, yeah, we knew that. Yeah. And then Pergamum today is going to be kind of interesting because there's actually, I guess there's two ways of breaking apart the word. One is to go to the Greek word pergos, or you can take it and separate it into per and gamos. If you do just pergos, it means high tower. If you go with pergamos, it means essentially it means marriage. And it's this per here, it intensifies it. So there's a personal sense to it. Okay? So whichever one you want to use and try to figure out which one that goes along with Pergamus, I think that we will find that this is the one that probably fits it best. But if you think about what high towers were used for in the Old Testament, a lot of times they had a spiritual sense to them. So anyway, whichever one you want to use this is the one that probably fits what we're going to be talking about today. Okay? All right, so we're not doing review time. We already did that, so come on. Let's see if you got them right. Yeah, got them right.
Spelled them right.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, my spelling. That's kind of what I went through fast. I wasn't worried about that. All right, so we're actually going to be doing verses 12 through 17 today. But again, I wanted to show you the timeline. Again, we first talked about Ephesus, and there are a lot of theologians that believe that these 7 churches represent the 7 periods of history for the Christian church. Okay. The first century would have been Ephesus, and that was the apostolic period. And you can see that if you look back at the commendation that Ephesus got, it was because they were outward reaching. And the problem they had was instead of being outward, they had turned inward. And that was the issue that the speaker had with them. So that's kind of apostolic, reaching out to the world for Christ and for his ministry. The second is Smyrna, and that was the 2nd and 3rd century, and that was a period of suffering. And we talked about the connection at the end there, where we're talking about Smyrna, the 10 days of persecution that was coming. And again, there are a lot of interpreters who feel that, well, the 10 days can just represent a time of completion. So it was going to, there would be the persecution period, and it would be a complete. It wouldn't be like half-hearted and then it would pick up again. There'd be a completion of that. The other option is that it represents the 10 different Roman Caesars that persecuted Christians. And these are we went through the 10 last week, I had a little thing there. And so we don't know exactly what it represents it's kind of, you know, hazy, but the 10 Caesars fit in there, and that time period fits within the range of the 2nd and 3rd century. Today we're going to talk about Pergamum. I'm not even going to try to get to Thyatira today, but those are the 4th, 5th, and 6th century, and it represents the period of idolatry within the church. And if you recall, the period of persecution ended with which Caesar? Constantine. And what did Constantine create, basically?
The church.
Right. Basically, he created the foundations of the church could be built. The Catholic Church could be built. So you can talk about, okay, this is the next step, and you can see that this timeline probably has somewhat of a Protestant viewpoint to it, because if you're talking about this being idolatrous, then what you're saying basically is the Catholic Church brought in a lot of idolatry into the Christian church. Would everyone agree with that's what that says? I'm not saying that's what happened, I'm saying that's what that says. Yes? No? Okay. All right. We've already talked about Ephesus, and I realized I was supposed to send this to you, and I did not. Shame on me. I apologize. We've already done Ephesus, as I talked about. We talked about Smyrna, and we're going to talk about Pergamum today. Lori thought it was hilarious that I told you all you had to copy it down, and you had 5 minutes. She didn't really think it was hilarious.
We knew that.
You knew that. You know Lori good enough to know. All right, so we're at verses 12 through 17. All right. It says, the message to Pergamum. And to the angel of the church in Pergamum write, the one who has the sharp two-edged sword says this, I know where you dwell, where Satan's throne is, and you hold firmly to my name and did not deny my faith, even in the days of Antipas, my witness, my faithful one, who was killed among you where Satan dwells. But I have a few things against you, because you have some there who hold the teaching of Balaam, who kept teaching Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols, and to commit sexual immorality. So you too have some who in the same way hold to the teaching of the Nicolaitans. Therefore repent, or else I am coming to you quickly, and I will wage war against them with the sword of my mouth. The one who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To the one who overcomes, I will give some of the hidden manna, and I will give him a white stone and a new name written on the stone, which no one knows except the one who receives it. Okay? All right, so review with the map. We've already talked about Ephesus here, Global Church Smyrna, and now we're up there at Pergamum where the cute little lavender box is. And you can see that we're moving in that counterclockwise, clockwise way that the mail would have traveled. So we're moving north and we're hitting Pergamum. Okay? All right, so here's a picture of what Pergamum would have looked like. Obviously it's today because they didn't have cameras back then, but you can see that like the amphitheater was huge. I think it held what was it? I want to say 25,000 people. And a lot of times, this is kind of a little aside, but if you the speakers obviously would be down here, right? So they'd be facing the audience. And when we think about Jesus doing the Sermon on the Mount, a lot of times we see him depicted standing on top of the hill, talking down. Well, how many of you ever sat on a hill and looked up at someone talking? It's very painful after a while. So in reality, what Jesus was doing is he was at the bottom of the hill, and the wind was, the breeze would be coming off the lake, and so the words would be carried up the hill, as opposed to him talking and the guy down at the bottom going, what's he saying? Okay? Because that was common, that was how they did acoustics back then, because they didn't have electronic keyboards or microphones. They didn't have Mr. Microphone. All right, so this is the drawing, just to give you an idea of what it would have looked like. Obviously, this is not all the city. The Pergamum was built up on a hill, okay, at the top of the hill. And there were a number of temples there. And that's one of the reasons they taught that many believe that that's what the throne of Satan means, is that there were a lot of different temples there. And that it was known as a place, basically it was for lack of a better term, it was kind of like a college town. The library that existed in Pergamum was actually had more manuscripts in it than the library at Alexandria. And those who've studied ancient history know that was a really big place until it got burned down. So their library was really big, which meant that it was a center of learning. And so it kind of ended up being like a college town because the wealthy people like to live with those areas. And so there was a lot of different gods that were being worshipped in that particular place. The most famous one is the altar of Zeus. He had a temple there, and he had this, a huge altar. It's not there anymore. It's now in Berlin. They took it apart. The Germans took it apart, and then rebuilt it in Berlin. So it's there in Berlin. You can go see it if you want to one day. We can take a field trip. Go to Berlin to see the altar of Zeus. So again, this was a city that was known for worshiping a lot of different gods. So let's go to verse 12. It says, "And to the angel of the church in Pergamum write, the one who has the sharp two-edged sword says this." All right. Again, we have, this is the descriptor of the speaker. We still do not have a decisive naming of who the speaker is. Is it God? Is it Jesus? Still don't have John's not identifying him as one or the other. Now, as I said last week, if you look at different versions, translations of the Bible, you'll see that all this stuff is red letter, which tells you they believe that this is Jesus. Okay. Then you'll have some that don't have red letter because they just don't do red letter. But there are a lot of people that believe that this is Jesus that's doing all this talking. Okay. Now, whether he is or not, we don't know for sure. Could be, we just don't know. Now, the descriptor that goes along with the speaker this time is the two-edged sword. And if you recall, this was part of the original description of the vision that John had at the very beginning in chapter 1. Every time he's talked about a church, one of the characteristics of the being that he saw is associated with that particular church. Okay? So now we're looking at Pergamum, and the two-edged sword is the descriptor that is taken from that initial vision. What did we say? Does anybody remember what we said that the two-edged sword represents?
The gospel. The Old and the New Testament.
The law and gospel, yeah, Old and New Testament. So basically it's the Bible in its entirety. Okay, that both are being used for judgment. All right? So we're going to see this come into play in relationship to Pergamum. Okay? And this is the commendation. "I know where you dwell, where Satan's, I almost said Santa's, where Satan's throne is, and you hold firmly to my name and did not deny my faith, even in the days of Antipas, my witness, my faithful one, who was killed among you, where Satan dwells." One of the key words in here is the word dwell. And that's because basically it's a reinforcement for us that that God, Jesus, whoever the speaker is, knows what our situation is. It's not distant to him. It's not unknown. We don't have to tell him. He knows where we are and what we're doing. And so the identification here of God, the speaker, knowing where they dwell, is to relate to them as I understand what it is that you're going through. I know what you're doing, what you're dealing with. Okay? And he says where Satan's throne is. Again, some feel like this may be actually where Satan, had his throne for his kingdom. Not necessarily literally, but spiritually. But again, the consensus seems to feel like it's more about the fact that this was a city that had a lot of different temples to a lot of different gods. Okay? And that they would have been worshiping those gods instead of Yahweh. He said, "And you hold firmly to my name and did not deny my faith, even the days of Antipas." This is one of those Hebrew versus English issues. When the Bible uses the word name, the Hebrew is this. Shem. Yeah. Okay? And Shem can mean a given name, but it can also mean character or reputation. All right? So the word here, name, it means one of these two things. All right. Now, since it's my name, we would assume that what? What do you assume the my is in this case? Okay, we assume it's Jesus, right? The fly in the ointment here, though, is that we assume we connect Jesus with Christianity, right? Christianity didn't exist at the time that John's writing it. They didn't call themselves Christians. So, for us to say that this is Christ or Christianity may be making a leap that doesn't necessarily apply because the term Christian didn't exist at that particular time. They didn't call themselves Christians. They called themselves followers of the way or believers. All right? So, possibly this is really referring to God, because at this time, again, there was no New Testament, right? It was all Old Testament plus some letters. So the Bible for them didn't include the New Testament because it didn't exist when John's writing this. Okay? So that's just a thing to think about. Is it Christ? Could be. Is it more indicative of God? If it is indicative of God, then that's going to create some problems for you and me in this next section, in the rest of this section that we'll be talking about. And actually, if it's Jesus, it still creates some issues for us, but we'll get to that in a second. Now, who is this Antipas guy? Did you ever have him in a Bible quiz?
Yes.
You have?
No.
Yes, in my doctorate class. We don't know who Antipas is. There's no other record of him but this right here. And all we know is what? He died for his faith. What does it say?
My
That's
version
a
of the
lot.
Bible says that he was a pastor or leader of the church at Pergamum.
What version are you using?
Well, I've been flipping through 5 or 6 different ones, but this is the Amplified.
Okay. And that's one of the things is that version assumes that,
Right.
but we don't know. There's nothing concrete that connects him with being the pastor or the head guy. And it would make sense that he might be the head guy because that's who they'd go after if they were going to persecute the Christians. They'd go for the head guy, like cutting the head off the snake and hoping that would disperse them. But there's other people on the other side that say that we don't know who he was necessarily, beyond the fact that he was martyred for the cause, right? And so the people, the believers there in Pergamum would have experienced that with him. And as you can well imagine, that would have caused them some angst and some trepidation. And he died for the fact that he was a believer. I mean, it says he died for my witness and my faithful one. All right, and again, we get the thing where Satan dwells. So they're in a bad position. They're a small minority in a world that is anti-God, anti-Yahweh. So here's a picture of the altar of Zeus, and it's hard to believe it's inside of a building, but it is. And those are real people, so it gives you an idea what the size is. It's pretty big. Okay. All right. So on to verse 14. But I have a few things against you, because you have some there who hold the teaching of Balaam, who kept teaching Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols, and to commit sexual immorality. Okay, when we talked about Ephesus, how many issues did the speaker have with them? Nobody. One. Remember the one thing? They had lost their first love. Okay? How about Smyrna? How many things did the speaker have issues with them? What, Lori?
None.
Very good. Very good.
You
Lori?
reviewed.
Yeah. She reviewed the car.
Let me see, what was you saying?
So 0. And so now we go to Pergamum, and they have a few. So on the one hand, they're facing persecution and enduring through it, but there's a problem. There's problems there. Okay. So don't miss that fact. Now, what are the problems? Some of the people in the church are following the teaching of Balaam, or if you want to spell it like the Hebrew, Bilam, and that was causing a problem. What is Balaam famous for?
Sacrifice the baby.
No, that was Baal.
Oh, the donkey guy,
Yeah, this is the donkey talking to him. I didn't draw that. I wish I had, but I didn't. Okay? To make a long story short, Balaam was a true prophet of Israel. He's a legitimate prophet. And Balak wanted to conquer the Jews, Israel. And he was thank you. He was a Moabite.
So good to have.
It
people
is,
like that.
it is.
Wow.
I think my percentage has gone up because Joelle's here today. Balak wanted to defeat the Israelites and get them under his control. So he goes to Balaam and tries to pay him to curse Israel so that they can be defeated. So Balaam decides he's going to do this, and then on the way to doing it, the donkey talks to him and tries to talk him out of it. And then an angel appears with a sword and tells him, bad things will happen if he does it. And in essence, he goes ahead and takes the job, and instead of cursing Israel, he blesses them 3 times. He doesn't realize it, but he blesses them 3 times. And so Balak's not able to, and I'm giving you the real, this is like the Reader's Digest version compressed. So he fails at that, and then Balak says, okay, I want you to be serious now. I want to defeat them. How can I do it? So Balaam says, here's how you do it. You send your women over there to seduce the men, and then get them to worship your idols. And he goes, well, hey, why didn't I think of that? It's not in the Bible like that, but I'm thinking that's probably what happened. So he sends the women over there, and they start, getting to know the Israelite guys, and next thing you know, the Israelites are committing sexual immorality in God's eyes, and they're worshiping idols. Okay? Now, does anybody know how